The older man's voice had once sliced through Aria Collins's childhood like a blade. "Who do you think you are questioning me like that?" he barked, his tone sharp, commanding, and indignant. Even now, decades later, the echo of that authority haunted her. But the woman who sat across from him in a polished Manhattan conference room was no longer the frightened little girl he had abandoned. Aria Collins, 30 years old, attorney at one of New York's most prestigious firms, with her own name, her own life, and her own hard-earned future. But before all that, there had been the yellow dress, the daisies, and the day she learned what it meant to be left behind. Childhood, the yellow dress. Aria was 6 years old the last time she held her mother's hand. That morning had felt special. Her mother, Elena Sterling, had brushed Aria's hair more carefully than usual, smoothing the dark strands and fastening them with a little white ribbon. She had picked out the yellow dress with white daisies, the one Aria loved most. "You look so pretty today," Elena said, her voice soft but strangely hollow. Aria's small hand clutched her mother's tightly as they walked through the sunlit streets. Her heart beat with excitement. Maybe they were going to the park. Or maybe, just maybe, they were going somewhere magical. But when they stepped into the orphanage, Aria's world shifted. The air was cold, carrying the sterile smell of cleaning supplies and something else, something she would later learn to call emptiness. "Where are we?" Aria whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the dimly lit hallway, the echo of children's voices somewhere in the distance. Her mother knelt in front of her, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. "You'll love it here," she said, forcing a smile. "They'll take such good care of you." Aria frowned. "When are you coming back?" The hesitation before her mother answered told her everything, though she was too young to understand it fully. "Soon, sweetheart," Elena said. "Be good, okay?" And then she was gone. The door closed, and with it, the last image of her mother's hand slipped away forever. Learning what it meant to be alone. Aria didn't cry, not at first. She sat on a small bench by the door, waiting. Hours passed, then days. She stared at the doorway every evening, hoping her parents would return. But they never did. The other children at the orphanage taught her quickly that survival meant toughness. Tears were a weakness. Questions went unanswered. The caretakers were busy, tired, and overworked. So Aria adapted. She buried her longing beneath stubborn silence. She learned to eat quickly before the older kids could snatch her food. She learned to fight back when they teased her about being the girl no one wanted. But at night, when the building grew quiet and the only sound was the soft creak of the old ceiling above her bunk, the questions came back. Why wasn't I enough? Did I cry too much? Did I make them angry? The uncertainty gnawed at her, fueling a small fire deep in her chest, a fire she would carry all her life. The truth unveiled. Years passed. By the time Aria was 10, she had stopped expecting her parents to return. But she never stopped wondering. It was Mrs. Fernandez, the orphanage director, who finally gave her the truth. Mrs. Fernandez was kind but always exhausted, her gray hair perpetually escaping its bun. One late afternoon, she called Aria into her cluttered little office. "Aria," she began gently, folding her hands. "You're old enough now to understand something." Aria sat stiffly, bracing herself. "Your parents, they didn't leave you here because of anything you did." The words hit like a strange relief, quickly followed by confusion. "They came from a very traditional family," Mrs. Fernandez continued, her eyes full of sorrow. "When your little brother was born, they decided he was the one who mattered most, the heir, the one to carry on the family's name." Aria blinked. Her brother. She hadn't even known she had one. "But I'm their daughter," she whispered. "Why didn't they want me too?" Mrs. Fernandez reached across the desk, resting her weathered hand on Aria's small one. "It's not about you, child. It's about them. Their beliefs. Their pride. They were wrong, so very wrong. But they thought they were doing what was expected." That night, lying in her narrow bed, Aria's world tilted again. Her parents hadn't left her because she was bad. They had left her because she was a girl, because she wasn't the one they thought worthy of love. The knowledge burned. But instead of crushing her, it transformed the fire inside her into something sharper.
A vow.
One day, she would show them. One day, she would prove to the world and to herself that she was more than enough. Books, escape, and ambition. Books became her refuge. The orphanage's tiny library smelled of dust and forgotten stories, but to Aria, it was a treasure chest. She devoured everything she could find: fairy tales, adventure novels, history books. Each page was a door to somewhere else, somewhere bigger than the gray walls that surrounded her. When the other kids teased her for always reading, she ignored them. When they stole her pencils or ripped her notes, she simply started again. Her grades soared. Teachers noticed her determination, praising her curiosity. By 12, she was reading at a high school level. By 14, she was tutoring the younger kids. "You're bright, Aria," Mrs. Fernandez told her one evening as she handed her a stack of donated notebooks. "Brighter than you know. Don't let anyone dim that light." Those words lodged deep in Aria's heart. A promise to herself. At 16, Aria stood in front of the cracked mirror in her dormitory, clutching a letter that would change her life. It was her first scholarship acceptance, proof that all the late nights, all the tears swallowed in silence, had been worth something. She whispered to her reflection, "You are not who they said you were. You are not disposable. You are Aria Collins." She had chosen the last name herself years earlier, during a writing assignment in middle school. Collins had no ties to her past, no ghosts attached to it. It was hers alone. That night, as the other kids laughed and played in the yard, Aria sat by the window with her acceptance letter pressed against her chest. She had no family, but she had her fire. And that would be enough. Aria still remembered the weight of the envelope in her hands. Thick paper. The kind that didn't bend easily. The kind that meant something important. Her name, neatly typed across the front. Miss Aria Collins. She had torn it open in the hallway of the orphanage, heart pounding so hard she thought it might leap from her chest. And there it was. Acceptance. Not just to a college, but to one of the top universities in the state, with a full scholarship. Mrs. Fernandez had cried when she read it over her shoulder. "You did it, Aria. You made it." The orphanage threw her a modest party, balloons donated by a local church, paper cups filled with soda, a chocolate cake with her name spelled in slightly crooked icing. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. That night, lying in bed with the acceptance letter clutched in her hand, Aria felt the first real taste of freedom. The world was opening, and she intended to run straight through. College, the taste of independence. The campus was sprawling, full of old stone buildings covered in ivy and buzzing with the chatter of students who seemed so at ease, so confident. Aria, with her thrift store clothes and her orphanage-honed wariness, felt like an intruder. But she refused to let anyone see that. She carried herself with quiet determination, speaking only when she had something meaningful to say, studying harder than anyone else. In her first semester, she sat at the front of every lecture hall, scribbling furious notes. She spent nights in the library until her eyes blurred. Professors noticed. "Miss Collins," one of them said after class one day, sliding her graded essay across the desk with a rare smile. "You think like a lawyer." The word stuck. Lawyer. Someone who took the mess of people's lives, their conflicts, their betrayals, their struggles, and found order in it. Someone who fought when others couldn't. It was more than a career. It was a purpose. By her second year, she declared her major, political science, with a clear path toward law school. The price of success. Success came, but not without cost. Aria worked part-time jobs, tutoring, waiting tables, shelving books at the library because scholarships covered tuition but not everything else. She learned to stretch $1 until it nearly tore. Instant noodles, second-hand coats, textbooks bought used and resold at the semester's end. Some nights, the exhaustion was so heavy she fell asleep at her desk, cheek pressed against open books. But she never complained. She couldn't. Every hardship was another step toward the life she was determined to build. And when she finally walked across the stage at graduation, diploma in hand, the applause of strangers echoing around her, she thought, This is just the beginning. Law school. The crucible. Law school was another beast entirely. The lectures were harder, the competition fiercer. Everyone there was brilliant, ambitious, hungry. But Aria was hungrier. She poured every ounce of her past into her studies. The rejection, the loneliness, the endless questions of why she hadn't been enough. Every case study was personal. Every argument, every paper, every mock trial. Because she knew what it was like to feel powerless. And she had sworn never to feel that way again. By the time she reached her final year, Aria wasn't just surviving law school. She was thriving. Meeting Ethan. It was during her second year at the firm, long after graduation, that she met him. Ethan Brooks. At first, he was just another face in the sea of attorneys, assigned to a joint case involving housing rights. But Aria noticed things. The way he leaned forward when people spoke, actually listening. The way he carried stress lightly, like he could always find something to laugh about. The way his presence made even the most brutal days feel manageable. Late nights at the office turned into shared takeout. Shared takeout turned into conversations. Conversations turned into something more. Aria resisted at first. She had built walls high and thick around herself. Letting someone in felt dangerous. But Ethan was patient. One night, after they'd won a particularly brutal case, he walked her home. The city lights glowed, taxis honking in the distance. "You know," he said as they reached her door, "you're the most driven person I've ever met. But sometimes it's okay to let someone else carry some of that weight." His words lingered long after he left. And slowly, brick by brick, she let him in. Dreams of a family. With Ethan, Aria allowed herself to imagine things she had long forbidden. A home filled with laughter. A child who would never question if they were wanted. They talked late into the night about futures, about children, about the kind of family they could create. But reality pressed hard against those dreams. Student loans. Rent. The crushing cost of life in New York. Her work at the firm mattered to her deeply. Helping those who couldn't fight for themselves gave her purpose. But it didn't pay much. And as much as she hated to admit it, she wanted more. Not just for herself, but for the family she and Ethan hoped to build. So she began to consider something she had once sworn she wouldn't. Corporate law. A ghost from the past. It was around this time, as she polished her resume and prepared to apply to larger firms, that the past crept back in. She hadn't thought about her family in years. Not really. But the thought came suddenly, uninvited. Who were they now? What kind of life had they built without her? Did they ever think of the little girl in the yellow dress with daisies? She pushed the questions away. She had no reason to dig up the past. And yet she couldn't shake the need to know. One afternoon, she picked up the phone and called the orphanage. Mrs. Fernandez had long since retired, but the new director, Julia Harris, was kind. "We still have some of your records," Julia said. "If you'd like, come by. I'll see what I can find." The thought made Aria's stomach twist, but she agreed. Because some questions didn't fade. They burned. Aria had spent years sharpening her skills in public interest law. She loved the work, the clients who reminded her of herself, people fighting against impossible odds. But passion didn't pay bills. The night she and Ethan sat at their small kitchen table, bank statements spread across the wood like a battlefield, she made the decision. "Maybe it's time," she whispered, eyes heavy. Ethan reached for her hand. Time for what? To stop running from corporate law. He studied her, searching her face. "You've avoided it because of them," he said gently. Her chest tightened. The ghosts of her past. "Yes," she admitted. "But maybe it's time to face it on my terms." And so she applied. Within weeks, she was sitting in the glossy lobby of Hamilton and Crane, one of Manhattan's most prestigious corporate firms. The interview was brutal. Case studies, hypothetical negotiations, ethical quandaries. But Aria was unshakable. Years of fighting for survival had prepared her better than any textbook. When the offer came, she accepted without hesitation. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Building a name. At Hamilton and Crane, the stakes were higher, the clients wealthier, the power struggle sharper. But Aria thrived. She was meticulous in contracts, ruthless in negotiations, fearless in court. Her reputation spread quickly. Collins, the woman who never blinked. "You don't play defense," one senior partner remarked during a late-night meeting. "You go for the jugular." Aria smiled faintly. "Survival taught me well." The money was better too. For the first time, she and Ethan could breathe. They moved into a modest but bright apartment in Brooklyn, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors. And for the first time, the dream of children felt possible. Motherhood. The day their daughter was born, Aria cried harder than she ever had. Tiny fingers wrapped around hers, fragile but strong, holding on with an instinct Aria understood deep in her bones. They named her Lila. Ethan whispered in Aria's ear that night in the hospital. "She'll never question if she's wanted." Not for a second. And she didn't. Aria poured into Lila every ounce of love she had been denied. She sang lullabies off-key, laughed at baby giggles, endured sleepless nights with tired but grateful eyes. Motherhood was messy, exhausting, overwhelming, but it was also healing. Every time Lila reached for her, every time she whispered, "Mama," a piece of Aria's broken childhood stitched itself back together. The balancing motherhood, and the intensity of Hamilton and Crane was brutal. There were nights Aria returned home long after Lila was asleep, guilt weighing on her like stone. But Ethan was steady. He picked up the slack, cooking dinners, reading bedtime stories, reminding Aria that she was not alone in this. "You don't have to be perfect," he told her when she broke down one night, exhausted. "You just have to be present." So she learned to carve out moments. Breakfasts full of laughter, Sunday afternoons at the park, bedtime stories whispered even if she was too tired to keep her eyes open. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building. The turning point. By her late 30s, Aria was no longer just another attorney at Hamilton and Crane. She was a partner. Her name carried weight. Her clients trusted her. And she was living the life she had once thought impossible, a home filled with warmth, a family that loved her without conditions, a career built on her own merit. But the past has a way of circling back. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Aria sat in her office, sunlight glinting off the glass walls, when her assistant knocked. "New client portfolio," the assistant said, setting a thick folder on her desk. Aria thanked her absently, flipping the folder open, and froze. Sterling Enterprises. Her breath caught. The name glared up at her in bold letters, polished and proud. Her family's empire. The empire they had chosen over her. The flood of memory. The room tilted. She saw flashes, her mother's hand slipping away, the orphanage's cold walls, the night Mrs. Fernandez told her the truth. And now here they were, needing her. For years, she had dreamed of this moment in shadows, what it would be like to face them, to stand tall in front of the people who had deemed her unworthy. Now the chance had come, but it wasn't just a fantasy. It was real. And the little girl in the yellow dress stirred inside her chest, whispering, "Don't let them break you again." Ethan's warning. That night, she told Ethan. "They're my family," she said, pacing their living room. "The ones who abandoned me. And now they're walking into my firm." Ethan's brows furrowed. "Do you want to take the case?" Aria stopped. "Want? No. But I need to." "Why?" "Because all my life, I've been running from them, avoiding the shadow of their name. If I walk away now, it means they still control me, and I won't give them that power." Ethan studied her, then nodded slowly, then faced them. "But remember, this time, you hold the cards." The meeting. The following week, Aria sat in the firm's grand conference room, the sterling files spread neatly before her. The door opened, and in walked Richard Sterling, patriarch of the empire. Gray-haired now, but still sharp, still commanding. Beside him, her mother, Elena. Older, thinner, eyes flicking nervously around the room. Aria's pulse thundered in her ears. Richard extended a hand. "Miss Collins, I presume?" Aria stood slowly, her expression cool. She didn't take his hand. "Yes," she said evenly. "I'll be handling your case." For the first time in her life, it was her voice that carried authority. And the look on Richard Sterling's face told her he knew it. Aria sat at the long mahogany table, file after file spread before her. Sterling Enterprises had come crawling to Hamilton and Crane because of a crisis, a potential takeover that could dismantle the empire. And they needed her. Richard Sterling shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. He wasn't used to being the one who needed. Aria kept her expression neutral, but inside, her chest blazed with something fierce. The man who once discarded me now depends on me. It wasn't triumph. Not exactly. It was justice. The brother. It was during discovery that she first saw him. Alexander Sterling. The heir. The boy for whom she had been cast aside. Now a man in his early 30s, polished in tailored suits, confident in the way only someone raised with privilege could be. He looked at her across the conference table, confusion flickering in his eyes. Later, in the hallway, he stopped her. "You're Aria Collins, right?" She met his gaze evenly. "Yes." "I couldn't help but notice, you look familiar." Her heart thudded, but her voice stayed cold. "I should. I'm your sister." His jaw slackened. "What? They didn't tell you, did they?" Her smile was sharp. "Of course not. Why tarnish the golden child's perfect life with the truth?" He stared at her, stunned. And for the first time, Aria saw it, not arrogance, not entitlement, but doubt. The mother's silence. Her mother avoided her eyes in every meeting. Elena Sterling, once so elegant, now seemed fragile. Her hands trembled when she signed documents. Her gaze lingered on Aria as if searching for the little girl she had abandoned. But Aria gave her nothing. Until one evening, as the office emptied, Elena lingered. "Aria," she whispered. The name cracked something inside her. Aria turned slowly. Don't say my name like you have the right." Tears filled Elena's eyes. "I wanted to come back for you." You left me?" Aria snapped. "You chose him. You chose all this." She gestured to the Sterling Empire, the endless hunger for wealth and power. "Over your own daughter." Elena's voice broke. "I was weak." Aria's hands curled into fists. "I was 6. I needed a mother. And you were weak." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. And then Aria walked away. The courtroom. The case built to a crescendo, a high-stakes battle against rivals trying to seize Sterling Enterprises. Aria stood before the judge. Arguments precise, voice steady. Every word cut like glass. Richard Sterling watched from the front row, his face unreadable. But when the ruling came down, victory for the Sterlings, it was Aria's name the court praised. Not Richard. Not Alexander. Aria Collins. She had saved the empire they once considered more valuable than her life. The irony was not lost on anyone. The offer. After the verdict, Richard approached her in private. "You're remarkable," he admitted, pride in his voice for the first time. "You belong with us, with this family. We want you back." Aria stared at him, her pulse hammering. This was the moment she had once dreamed of. But now it felt hollow. She thought of Lila's laughter, Ethan's steady love, the home she had built with her own hands. She already had a family, one that chose her every day. Slowly, she shook her head. "No," she said softly but firmly. "You don't get to claim me now. You gave me up, and I built something better without you." Richard's face hardened. He wasn't a man used to rejection. But Aria didn't care. For once, the little girl in the yellow dress felt free. Closure. A week later, Alexander found her. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "If I had," he trailed off, guilt clouding his eyes. Aria studied him. He was innocent in this. Another child shaped by choices he hadn't made. "I know," she said simply. They weren't suddenly siblings. They weren't suddenly bonded. But there was understanding. And maybe, in time, that would be enough. The choice. One evening, Aria stood on her balcony, city lights glittering below. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You okay?" he murmured. She nodded slowly. "For the first time, I think I am." She had faced them, spoken her truth, chosen her own path. Her past no longer defined her.
Her future did.
She turned to Ethan, her eyes softening. Let's go inside. Lila's waiting. And as she stepped back into the warmth of her home, Aria knew the girl in the yellow dress was no longer waiting by the door. She was finally, truly free.